In the shadowy corners of history, where the lines between fact and fiction blur into a haze of conspiracy and intrigue, lies a tale that has captured the imagination of countless seekers of truth. This is not merely a story of science gone awry or military experiments gone rogue. It is a narrative woven with the threads of time, space, and the very fabric of reality itself. Welcome to the world of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia Experiment, a saga that intertwines human ambition, advanced technology, and the enigmatic presence of extraterrestrial life. Picture a time in the 1940s, a period marked by the throes of World War II, when nations were racing against each other to harness the powers of science and technology. The United States, in its fervent quest for supremacy, embarked on a clandestine mission that would forever alter the course of history. This mission, shrouded in secrecy and speculation, is said to have involved the U.S. Navy and a destroyer escort named the USS Eldridge. The intent? To render the ship invisible to radar, to create a cloaking technology that would give the U.S. an unprecedented advantage in warfare. But what transpired during those fateful days in 1943 was far more profound than anyone could have anticipated. The Philadelphia Experiment, as it would come to be known, spiraled into a realm of the extraordinary. Witnesses claim that during the experiment, the USS Eldridge not only became invisible but also experienced a phenomenon that defied the laws of physics. Reports surfaced of the ship disappearing from one port in Philadelphia, only to reappear in another location, seemingly defying the constraints of time and space. Some accounts describe the ship as having been enveloped in a blinding light, while others speak of a chilling presence that seemed to accompany the event, an otherworldly essence that hinted at dimensions beyond our understanding. Enter Bielek, a man whose life became irrevocably intertwined with the mysteries of Project Rainbow. Bielek, who claimed to have been a participant in the Philadelphia Experiment, spoke of experiences that would send shivers down the spine of even the most skeptical observer. He asserted that the experiment had not only rendered the ship invisible, but had also catapulted him through time, transporting him to the year 2749. In this future world, he recounted a society vastly different from our own, a civilization that had learned to harness the powers of time travel and dimensional travel. Bielek's accounts were filled with vivid detail, painting a picture of a world where humanity had transcended its limitations, yet one that also bore the scars of its past. Bielek's claims did not stop there. He spoke of a dark truth, a revelation that the military had been in contact with extraterrestrial beings, that the technology they were experimenting with was not solely human in origin. He described meetings with alien entities, beings that possessed knowledge far beyond our comprehension, and the unsettling realization that humanity was not alone in the cosmos. His testimony ignited a firestorm of debate, drawing both fervent believers and staunch skeptics into the fray. Was Bielek a visionary, a whistleblower exposing the hidden truths of our reality, or was he simply a man lost in the labyrinth of his own mind? As the narrative of the Philadelphia Experiment began to evolve, it found a new voice in Andrew Basiago, a man who would later emerge as an ex-presidential candidate. Basiago claimed to have been a part of a secretive program known as Project Pegasus. This initiative, he asserted, was an extension of the very experiments that birthed the Philadelphia Experiment. Basiago spoke of a childhood spent in the corridors of clandestine government facilities, where he and other children were allegedly trained to harness the powers of time travel and teleportation. Basiago's accounts were no less compelling than Bielek's. He detailed experiences of traveling through time, of witnessing pivotal moments in history: Lincoln's assassination, the Apollo 11 moon landing, and even the signing of the Declaration of Independence. He described how these journeys were not merely passive observations, but active engagements, where he and others were tasked with the responsibility of shaping the timeline. His assertions raised questions that reached far beyond the realm of personal experience. They beckoned us to contemplate the very nature of time itself. If time could be traversed, what did that mean for our understanding of history? What possibilities lay in the hands of those who dared to manipulate it? But perhaps the most tantalizing aspect of Basiago's narrative was his claim of encounters with extraterrestrial life. He spoke of beings that existed in higher dimensions, entities that had knowledge of our world and its trajectory. His assertions echoed Bielek's, weaving a tapestry of interdimensional existence that suggested humanity was but a small piece in the grand puzzle of the universe. Basiago's revelations sparked a wave of interest in the implications of time travel and its potential connections to UFOs and alien life. Were these sightings and phenomena merely the remnants of our own technological experiments? Or were they harbingers of a reality that lay just beyond our grasp? As we delve deeper into this narrative, we must confront the uncomfortable truth that these accounts, while extraordinary, exist in a realm where skepticism reigns. The scientific community has largely dismissed the claims of Bielek and Basiago, labeling them as fabrications or the products of delusion. Yet the allure of their stories persists, drawing in those who yearn for a deeper understanding of our place in the cosmos. Are we merely observers in a universe that operates on rules we have yet to comprehend? Or are we active participants in a cosmic dance that transcends the boundaries of time and space? The implications of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment extend far beyond the confines of military experimentation. They challenge us to question our understanding of reality, to ponder the existence of parallel dimensions, and to explore the possibility that we are not alone in our quest for knowledge. The narratives of Bielek and Basiago invite us to consider the intersections of science and the metaphysical, to explore the boundaries of human potential, and to confront the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of our perception. In this film, we embark on a journey through the annals of history and the corridors of time, guided by the voices of those who dared to speak out against the silence of the unknown. We will examine the evidence, sift through the claims, and unravel the threads of a narrative that has captivated the minds of many. As we navigate the complexities of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment, we will seek to understand the implications of time travel, the nature of extraterrestrial existence, and the potential for humanity to transcend its limitations. In a world where the extraordinary often collides with the mundane, we invite you to suspend your disbelief and join us on this exploration of the unknown. Together, we will delve into the depths of conspiracy, the heights of imagination, and the vast expanse of possibility that lies before us. The tale of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment is not merely a story of the past. It is a reflection of our hopes, our fears, and our insatiable curiosity about the universe and our place within it. As we embark on this journey, we may just uncover truths that challenge our perceptions and awaken a sense of wonder that has long been dormant. Welcome to a world where time is fluid, dimensions intertwine, and the boundaries of reality are waiting to be explored. In the shadowy corners of history, where the lines between fact and fiction blur into a haze of conspiracy and intrigue, lies a tale that has captured the imagination of countless seekers of truth. This is not merely a story of science gone awry or military experiments gone rogue. It is a narrative woven with the threads of time, space, and the very fabric of reality itself. Welcome to the world of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment, a saga that intertwines human ambition, advanced technology, and the enigmatic presence of extraterrestrial life. Picture a time in the 1940s, a period marked by the throes of World War II, when nations were racing against each other to harness the powers of science and technology. The United States, in its fervent quest for supremacy, embarked on a clandestine mission that would forever alter the course of history. This mission, shrouded in secrecy and speculation, is said to have involved the U.S. Navy and a destroyer escort named the USS Eldridge. The intent? To render the ship invisible to radar, to create a cloaking technology that would give the U.S. an unprecedented advantage in warfare. But what transpired during those fateful days in 1943 was far more profound than anyone could have anticipated. The Philadelphia experiment, as it would come to be known, spiraled into a realm of the extraordinary. Witnesses claim that during the experiment, the USS Eldridge not only became invisible but also experienced a phenomenon that defied the laws of physics. Reports surfaced of the ship disappearing from one port in Philadelphia, only to reappear in another location, seemingly defying the constraints of time and space. Some accounts describe the ship as having been enveloped in a blinding light, while others speak of a chilling presence that seemed to accompany the event, an otherworldly essence that hinted at dimensions beyond our understanding. Enter Bielek, a man whose life became irrevocably intertwined with the mysteries of Project Rainbow. Bielek, who claimed to have been a participant in the Philadelphia experiment, spoke of experiences that would send shivers down the spine of even the most skeptical observer. He asserted that the experiment had not only rendered the ship invisible, but had also catapulted him through time, transporting him to the year 2749. In this future world, he recounted a society vastly different from our own, a civilization that had learned to harness the powers of time travel and dimensional travel. Bielek's accounts were filled with vivid detail, painting a picture of a world where humanity had transcended its limitations, yet one that also bore the scars of its past. Bielek's claims did not stop there. He spoke of a dark truth, a revelation that the military had been in contact with extraterrestrial beings, that the technology they were experimenting with was not solely human in origin. He described meetings with alien entities, beings that possessed knowledge far beyond our comprehension, and the unsettling realization that humanity was not alone in the cosmos. His testimony ignited a firestorm of debate, drawing both fervent believers and staunch skeptics into the fray. Was Bielek a visionary, a whistleblower exposing the hidden truths of our reality, or was he simply a man lost in the labyrinth of his own mind? As the narrative of the Philadelphia experiment began to evolve, it found a new voice in Andrew Basiago, a man who would later emerge as an ex-presidential candidate. Basiago claimed to have been a part of a secretive program known as Project Pegasus. This initiative, he asserted, was an extension of the very experiments that birthed the Philadelphia experiment. Basiago spoke of a childhood spent in the corridors of clandestine government facilities, where he and other children were allegedly trained to harness the powers of time travel and teleportation. Basiago's accounts were no less compelling than Bielek's. He detailed experiences of traveling through time, of witnessing pivotal moments in history, Lincoln's assassination, the Apollo 11 moon landing, and even the signing of the Declaration of Independence. He described how these journeys were not merely passive observations, but active engagements, where he and others were tasked with the responsibility of shaping the timeline. His assertions raised questions that reached far beyond the realm of personal experience. They beckoned us to contemplate the very nature of time itself. If time could be traversed, what did that mean for our understanding of history? What possibilities lay in the hands of those who dared to manipulate it? But perhaps the most tantalizing aspect of Basiago's narrative was his claim of encounters with extraterrestrial life. He spoke of beings that existed in higher dimensions, entities that had knowledge of our world and its trajectory. His assertions echoed Bielek's, weaving a tapestry of interdimensional existence that suggested humanity was but a small piece in the grand puzzle of the universe. Basiago's revelations sparked a wave of interest in the implications of time travel and its potential connections to UFOs and alien life. Were these sightings and phenomena merely the remnants of our own technological experiments, or were they harbingers of a reality that lay just beyond our grasp? As we delve deeper into this narrative, we must confront the uncomfortable truth that these accounts, while extraordinary, exist in a realm where skepticism reigns. The scientific community has largely dismissed the claims of Bielek and Basiago, labeling them as fabrications or the products of delusion. Yet the allure of their stories persists, drawing in those who yearn for a deeper understanding of our place in the cosmos. Are we merely observers in a universe that operates on rules we have yet to comprehend? Or are we active participants in a cosmic dance that transcends the boundaries of time and space? The implications of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment extend far beyond the confines of military experimentation. They challenge us to question our understanding of reality, to ponder the existence of parallel dimensions, and to explore the possibility that we are not alone in our quest for knowledge. The narratives of Bielek and Basiago invite us to consider the intersections of science and the metaphysical, to explore the boundaries of human potential, and to confront the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of our perception. In this film, we embark on a journey through the annals of history and the corridors of time, guided by the voices of those who dared to speak out against the silence of the unknown. We will examine the evidence, sift through the claims, and unravel the threads of a narrative that has captivated the minds of many. As we navigate the complexities of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment, we will seek to understand the implications of time travel, the nature of extraterrestrial existence, and the potential for humanity to transcend its limitations. In a world where the extraordinary often collides with the mundane, we invite you to suspend your disbelief and join us on this exploration of the unknown. Together, we will delve into the depths of conspiracy, the heights of imagination, and the vast expanse of possibility that lies before us. The tale of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment is not merely a story of the past. It is a reflection of our hopes, our fears, and our insatiable curiosity about the universe and our place within it. As we embark on this journey, we may just uncover truths that challenge our perceptions and awaken a sense of wonder that has long been dormant. Welcome to a world where time is fluid, dimensions intertwine, and the boundaries of reality are waiting to be explored.
The Philadelphia experiment acquired that name in the last days, you might say, or the last weeks of the tests. The purpose of the Philadelphia experiment was to make a Navy ship, or a merchant ship for that matter, invisible to radar, and in the early experiments also invisible to sight. The idea was that they wanted this invisibility because during the war periods of 1942-43, the German U-boat fleets were having a field day sinking shipping coming across the Atlantic to England. About 1 out of 2 ships was sank. 50% was going down. And they hoped by making the ships invisible to German radar, because they had good radar also, they would be able to greatly reduce the loss. That was the basic idea. The work which preceded the tests was back many years to 1931, and the University of Chicago, to the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton, New Jersey in 1934, under the directorship at that time of not Albert Einstein, but of Nikola Tesla. Albert Einstein was the overseer of the institute. He was in on all the projects. And after a lot of theoretical work and early tests, the first successful one being September 1940 at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, they finally came to the ship which became well known, DE-173, or the Eldridge. A lot of equipment had to be installed on that ship, especially built for the tests, and it operated out of the Philadelphia Navy Yard. And that was its home berth, and that was why it was called the Philadelphia experiment, because that was the principal initial test, and there were other ships involved and other tests involving the same basic principles. Actually, there were 4 total.
So what was the body of water there that...
Actually, they were out in the harbor of Philadelphia.
Just right off.
Downstream about 6 miles.
6 miles, mm-hmm.
And a wider section, and where they were somewhat shielded from the view of the city.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of the test was, of course, to make the ship invisible to radar, because we had very good radar in 1943, so did the British, so did the Germans. And they hoped to defeat the German radar system. Now, the first test was very successful in terms of the fact that the ship was not only optically but radar invisible, and that was on July 22nd, 1943, with the DE-173, the Eldridge, in the Philadelphia harbor. The other ships did not take part in any tests in the Philadelphia area. They were elsewhere. One was in Norfolk, Virginia. The third was in the Azores. And the fourth was out in the Pacific, someplace operating out of the Long Beach Naval Shipyard.
In California.
In California. I have yet to acquire more information on that one, but I do know now that it did occur.
Mm-hmm.
The test seemed technically very successful, but the problem was they had a personnel problem because they required very high power electromagnetic systems. They were running in the megawatts of power for both the magnetic field and generating the rotating magnetic field and for generating the rotating electric field. I call it electric field because actually it was a series 4 actually radio transmitters having more or less common variety at that time, except they operated at higher than normal radio frequencies, actually around 160 megahertz for the carrier. And they produced rotating fields, an electric field and a magnetic field, one inside the other. The ship was surrounded by these fields, and the object was to make the ship invisible. Now, how did they do that in terms of the technology of that time? There are other systems now which are different than the original. What they were doing was tampering with the time field. As the unified field theory of Einstein shows, you have a complete interlocking network, if you will, of electric fields. The electric field, as you call it, as goes throughout space according to the original Maxwell equations. You have a magnetic field around the Earth, and you can generate a much stronger than the normal field. You have a gravity field. Gravity is a field. It is not a mutual attraction of matter for matter.
Okay, that's good for our audience.
The three elements working together will interact with the time field. And time is not an illusion. It is a reality. It is a reality which can be measured and which can be manipulated. The Russians have since done this. It's been done in the lab since. And, of course, many years of work have gone in since this period of World War II and the disaster that occurred. So what they were doing was playing with the time field. The object was, if you shift the time field slightly, the ship is no longer visible either to the eye or to radar, or to a camera for that matter.
So how does that work, Alan, shifting that?
Well, you have, to get a little bit technical, I'll not try to get too technical for your audience, you actually have 3 physical dimensions which we all know. There's the length, breadth, and width of a chair, a table, whatever. But you only see that, and it only endures in time because time also has a flow. If there was no time flow, the object would not exist. It is dependent upon time, which is normally measured as the 4th dimension. But there are 2 beyond that. The only one we're concerned with was the 5th dimension, which is like a spinner, or if you get this child's toy of the Slinkies, you probably have seen, or many people have seen.
It's a good example.
You have a coil, and you can hit it and you get a forward wave in that coil. The outer periphery of the coil represents the 5th dimension, to give you an analog. By manipulating that actual outer 5th dimension, you change, because if you change in a local area, and this is only in a local area, not universally, the rate at which that spiral goes, you change the flow rate of time along the edge.
Well, that makes sense. That's a very good way of explaining that.
So if what you do is we are in this reality along the edge, so to speak, in a normal reality. And if you change that time flow, then that localized area of time starts to shift in relation to the main time flow, which outside of the area of the experiment is experiencing. So as you change that local area, the object will fade into invisibility. You have to do it very carefully because if you go too far, you drop out of our universe into another one. This they didn't want to do. But this is what happened in the second experiment. The first one was very successful in terms of the hardware. They had a lot of problems with personnel because the very high-powered electromagnetics, something which had never been attempted before because many sailors were on the deck of the Eldridge exposed directly to that equipment. Those below deck were not harmed or affected. But those were severely disturbed. They experienced nausea, sickness, illness, disorientation, and they cut the test short after about 20 minutes and took the ship back into its normal berth at the Philadelphia Navy Yard and took the 6 sailors off, and the Navy said not to worry, of course we have another crew for you. They were all volunteers. They'd all signed their life away, so to speak. And of course von Neumann knew, because after 1942 March, when Tesla bowed out, von Neumann took over the project, Dr. John von Neumann, and he knew there was a serious problem. He was aware of the possibility, but they knew then they had it. And he asked the Navy for more time to study the problem. He gave him a drop-dead date, is what they call it. In other words, you complete these tests by the 12th of August, 1943, or forget it.
Was that turned out to be a significant day, though?
It was very significant. We did not know
Which
at
you
that
didn't
time
know that.
why it was significant. I went to the man who was the head of the Office of Naval Engineering, as they called it then, Alboin Sr. I said, why this date? This is an engineering test. He found out that it came from the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral King, which was very strange, because that man is only concerned with the actual operation of the Navy in all theaters of war. He was not concerned directly with an engineering test. Someplace else, we found out much later, is where the order came from, and King was merely part of the transmission path.
Where did it come from?
It came from Montauk in 1983, with the alien presence that was there. Now, I must point out that the engineering that was done for the Philadelphia experiment was native. It was ours. We did it. It was knowledge and technology which had been developed over a period of decades. The mathematics was in place. The understanding was in place. This was cutting-edge technology, not what was in the textbooks in the 40s, because Duncan and I went through school and both had PhDs in physics, and we thought we knew it all until we went to the Institute and found out how little we knew. Because the cutting edge was way ahead of the education.
But that wouldn't have happened, do you think, without Tesla's input?
Perhaps not. Tesla was a brilliant man, and everybody acknowledged his brilliance, even Dr. von Neumann. Interestingly enough, everybody on staff at the Institute, including Duncan and myself, had PhDs in something. And here was Nikola Tesla, without a degree to his name.
Exactly.
Yet his reputation was impeccable, and he had never failed in anything he did or undertook to that point. But he failed that test in March 1942 on a battleship deliberately because he knew there was a personnel problem. The Navy would not give him an extension of time, so he deliberately failed the test and bowed out. Von Neumann took over. He didn't bow out. He realized there was a problem. He tried to solve it. The Navy would not give him any more time. So on the 12th of August, what do? We go out in the harbor again. This time there were 3 observer ships. There was the SS Friaseth, which is a Navy merchant ship, a Coast Guard cutter, and of course the carrier on which the control group and the Captain Harrison, who was in charge of the test, was located, along with, of course, Dr. John von Neumann and other interested parties in the Navy. So at the appropriate time, we fired up the equipment. Now, I must add, Duncan and I ran that equipment because there were no computers in those days and everything had to be manually operated. So we had to go through the proper sequence and watch what happened to make sure everything was doing what it was supposed to do. So for the first, to the outside observers on the deck of the carrier, for about 70 seconds, it appeared like everything was normal. They had radar on visibility. You could still see the ship through a greenish fog, and you could see this huge line of water beyond where the hull of the ship should be, where there was no water visible. Then after about 70 seconds, the ship vanished. There was a flash of blue light. The ship was gone, the water line was gone, and they knew the ship was gone. And it was gone for about 4 hours until it returned.
I bet they were pretty scared at that point.
They were very upset, to put it mildly. They were panicked, because this was not supposed to happen.
Exactly.
And it did not happen in the first test. Now on the inside, we were Duncan and I. We were running the equipment. So what happened to us? We observed after about 30 seconds that something was going wrong. The equipment wasn't functioning normally. The banks of electron tubes, some 3,000 of them, that ran the field coils and the big generators down in the hold, which generated the power for the magnetic fields, which were 4 coils on deck, they were acting very strangely. And then we started to get electric arc overs in the cabin with indicating very high voltage, and there was no high voltage in that control cabin. So we went to shut the power off, and of course the main control handles for the AC power we found frozen. We couldn't budge them. So we got the idea, something's wrong, we can't control it, let's get out of here. So we both opened the bulkhead door and ran out. Quite logical to that point.
Yes.
Then we got the idea, logical or not, looking around the deck and seeing sailors milling all over in this fog, and you couldn't see a thing beyond the railing of the ship. I have to make that very evident, because beyond the railing of the ship you could see nothing. We had the bright idea, we thought, let's jump overboard and swim ashore. We were both good swimmers. Well, we jumped overboard, but we never hit the water. We started to fall and fall and fall. And we fell, and it was like going down an elevator shaft without ever hitting the bottom. Well, subjectively, maybe 2 minutes. We wound up standing on our feet at night inside of a military base where there's a chain link fence, obviously military design, to our back. And suddenly appears overhead a helicopter with a bright searchlight that picked us out. MPs come out of somewheres and grab us and take us to a building, and we go in the building and on an elevator and go down several levels, I don't know how many now.
So to that point, the movie seems to be fairly accurate.
To that point, the movie is quite accurate except for the date. They showed it October. The second test was August. The third test was in October.
I see.
And here, this elevator door opens. We look in, we see this room and a hallway with a lot of military personnel and one elderly civilian walking towards us. White hair with what was left of it. And he walks towards us and says, "Gentlemen, I've been expecting you. I'm Dr. John von Neumann."
So it happened that quickly? Or was there really a time dropout for you?
There was sort of a time dropout for us, but that's the way it felt at that time. And what we remembered at that point. It seemed very continuous and fluent, except we were very, very distraught, to put it mildly.
So going through the hyperspatial tunnel, do you have any recollection of what that felt like?
As I say, like falling down an elevator shaft without ever hitting bottom,
Well,
and
we're
a
looking
feeling
at a
of
40-year
terror.
drop, right?
Well, in a sense, it was a 40-year drop. But we didn't age more than a minute or so. There was no apparent change in our appearance or our uniforms or anything. So we argued with this man, and he insisted he was Dr. von Neumann, the same one we had known. He says, "You're not in 1943 anymore. You're in 1983 at Montauk, Long Island, part of the Phoenix Project," or as we've called it later, the Montauk Project. We didn't believe him at first, but he gave us a Cook's tour of the underground. And when you see, in style of 1983, modern computers, graphic displays, tape recorders, none of which existed in 43.
You must have felt like you were in another world.
Just about. Color television, large screen display. Well, after we had the Cook's tour over with, we sat down and started to watch TV. Well, you see things like Man on the Moon, discussions about the Cold War. This is circa 1983, of course. And freeway tie-ups in the big cities and the new skylines. And then the advertising says, "Why don't you take your next vacation to Hawaii with us? Fly on our 747 jumbo jet." Huh? What's that? Well, this is what we were confronted with. And we finally got the idea that maybe von Neumann was right. We were in 83. Then he told us, "Well, we got a problem, gentlemen. That ship is generating a field which we cannot control from here. It's in hyperspace. The bubble is growing. It will continue to grow until something shuts that equipment off. There's enough fuel there to keep it running for 30 days if something doesn't break down first. We can't control it. We have to send you back there." I said, "Oh, yes? Well, how are you going to do that?" "Well, we have the means. Here at Montauk, we have complete control over space and time. We can send you anywhere as we want at any time we want." So they sent both of us back to the Eldridge. So this is not in accordance with the movie The Philadelphia Experiment was, but in the last in a part of the movie that came close to the facts. We were sent back together to the Eldridge with the instructions: destroy that equipment, smash it, whatever you have to do to shut it down. So we found axes, started smashing everything in sight, electronic equipment, tubes and so forth, and when the generator started to wind down, we knew that it was over so far as the experiment was concerned. So we went out of the control room, looked around out on deck, and Duncan and I were together, and we saw 2 sailors buried in the steel decks and 2 more buried upright in the bulkhead. And those who were on deck were in total pandemonium and disorientation and sick, very, very disoriented.
That must have been a shock for you.
It was very much of a shock. Duncan looks around, looks and runs over towards the railing and looks at me like, "Well, aren't you coming with me?" He wanted to get out of this. And I spotted our younger brother, Jim, who had enlisted in the Navy after Pearl Harbor, who was 6 years younger, and he enlisted, and he became part of that experimental crew, and he drew the straw for the second test, so to speak. And he was in the bulkhead dying.
Oh.
I went over and put my arms around him because his head and shoulders were out of the steel, and he died that way. And Duncan disappeared. We didn't see him again. The ship came out of the fog and was again back in the harbor where we had started. And of course, a boarding crew came on board because they could see from the deck of the carrier that something was drastically wrong. They looked around, made a radar report, brought a special boarding party who brought the ship back under its own power into the back section of the Navy Yard, took everybody off, and then we had a 4-day board of inquiry. What went wrong? I gave my report. that I'd been in 83 and all this had happened with Duncan. They didn't believe me.
They didn't believe you.
Oh, no. And Von Neumann
You know,
didn't
isn't that
either.
interesting? You go through the tunnel and you end up in 83. You don't believe that you're in 83. Then you go back to 43 and you tell me you've been to 83 and they don't believe you're in 43 either. I mean, you know, it's really wild.
Absolutely. But Von Neumann had a little rental reservation. He took me aside and said, I want to talk with you later. Well, as time went on, they did have a third test, and it was without personnel on board. They ran it like the 1940 test with long cables, turned everything on from another ship. And the Eldridge once again disappeared and came back some 15, 20 minutes later. I was not in that test or involved with it, I only had the reports on it. And it disappeared again. And it came back, and the whole, everything seemed to be all right except in the hold for the control equipment, because they had time enough to put a whole spare set of equipments on board. The equipment was a smoking ruin, and some of it was missing, and they just washed their hands of any more tests with the Eldridge. And it was re-outfitted, went to sea in 1944, about January. It was at sea till the war ended and went in mothballs in 46, and in 1951 it was given to the Greeks along with another destroyer. The Greeks still have it in the Navy to this day. They call it the Leon. And I understand that the Navy is trying to buy it back from the Greeks to put it in a museum. Well, whatever.
Well, so much for sharing knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I think when you sell it for...
See, the test, so far as we know, did not stop at that time, as I know now. At that time, I assumed they had stopped in late 43. But Von Neumann did resume the operation and examining the problems of what went wrong in 1947. And by 1952, had come up with a whole new system. I was not part of that anymore. And I'll tell you briefly in a minute what happened to me. But in any case, he found a way to solve the personnel problem. I don't know how he did it. It involved the use of a computer, a new system. It delivered to the Navy in 1953. They tested it on another ship in 1954 as a complete success. No side effects on the personnel. And of course, through many generations, that equipment is now used today, or some variation of it.
Well, you can see a parallel between the large and the small, because when we first had computers, they took up a whole building, and now now they're very minuscule. So they found ways to make it much smaller.
Some years ago, as an aside, in about 1960, when I was in Phoenix, I was given a tour of the radar warning system for aircraft. It was built by Federal Electric and delivered to the Air Force Base in Phoenix in 1960. It was all tubes, 50,000 vacuum tubes, and it generated a lot of heat. They kept it still running. As late as 1970, 75, we're still going.
That's interesting.
And they said, we have a good control on a good handle. It generates a lot of heat, but it's very reliable. And this is where it was. A monster. It filled up an entire room.
Yes.
And now you can put more computer power in a little package in your hand.
It's true.
With solid state that you could do with an entire room full of hardware designed out of the 1950s and the 50s.
That's true. I want to go back to this invisibility aspect, because what would be the implications, or what are the results? How have we seen this technology advance, and how are they using it today?
Well, it's gone through many changes. The entire basic approach, I believe, has changed today. They're not tampering with time now. They're using a different approach because theory has shown that there are other ways you can manipulate time, or not even manipulate time, as certain people have shown in the laboratory and more recently, like in the last 2 or 3 years, and of course this is in the civilian aspect of trying to replicate some of the equipment. You can produce a phenomena of resonance wherein you can literally blank out an object to a radar return or reflection. You can tune the system in a manner so that the radar beam or system, and we had very good radar in the 40s, 43, they were running at 9.5 gigahertz. I didn't know they were that high until I went back and checked the books. And that's about what they use today in many of the systems. Some are higher. But you can blank out that frequency by absorption, or resonant absorption of the object, if you know how to manipulate that object by tuned absorptive material. That's one approach, like they use in the stealth technologies. You absorb enough of the energy, you get no return.
So they're building the stealth bomber, say, out of material that...
Special materials.
Special material. Is that on planet or off planet?
On planet.
On planet.
And they also have the complete invisibility system in addition to that absorptive material, wherein they produce a true cloaking. That's the third level of the stealth technology. It's used today in all of the Navy fighter aircraft. They've used it in the B-1 stealth bomber, the stealth fighter, the B-2 bomber, which is a little older, and of course the SR-71, and of course all the Navy fighters, and probably all of the Israeli fighters, and who knows where else. It's even down, I'm told now, to a little package size you can put on your belt for personal invisibility.
Well, you know, there was an article in one of the scandal sheets, I think, that had a picture of Bush a few years ago with his bodyguards, and then there was this one invisible entity that they could only see with the infrared.
You could only see because of the water lapping at his feet at the seashore fishing.
Yes, that was
and
pretty...
the fishing pole in the middle was standing there ostensibly on its own.
Just amazing.
Well, I have an original of that photo in color, and that was not a fake.
That's pretty interesting.
I'm not going to say how I got it either.
Well, you don't have to. That's all right. That's all right. So these sailors had a lot of medical problems then as a result of this, and you mentioned something about going into a lot of psychiatric studies.
Psychiatric studies, psychiatric care. They were in Bethesda and elsewhere being examined. Some went to the funny farms for the rest of their life. Those who were not that bad were given treatment and survived, and eventually were given a discharge from the Navy, went on a civilian life without any pensions and without any compensation. Those who survived knew largely what happened, but their families were told that, oh, it was an accident. Those who died were told they died at sea in the war. They covered up the entire experiment. They did not want to know anyone to know outside of the Navy, in fact, even in the Navy, what had happened, because it involved several things. Not merely the technology of what happened then, and also the biological effects, which of course became very interesting because it set a precedent of learning how much energy the human neurological system can withstand, or the brain can withstand, before it breaks down, physically breaks down.
That's pretty interesting.
That was one of the things, but they didn't want the public to know they had done this. But the third and most important was the fact that the ship went into hyperspace. They penetrated other universes by the locking up with the Montauk Project on 12 August 1983, which was operational for years, but they stayed on 24 hours a day from August 1 approximately on. And that was engineered. It was engineered that the lockup would occur on the 12th of August for one reason. Well, several perhaps, but one reason for that date, the 12th of August. And that is the point at which the Earth's biorhythms peak out. There's four of them. The human body has three. Earth, like a body, has four.
Yes, that's true.
And it's a living body in many senses.
Yes, it is.
They all peak out on the 12th of August, 1943, 63, 83, every 20 years. And that was the synchronization, you might say, for the lockup of the two experiments.
That was a critical point.
A very critical time. Because the first test of the Eldridge, there was no lockup. The system was operational during that period. It was operational for years at Montauk. That was one of the critical points. The other critical point was that it caused a rift in space-time, 40 years wide, which allowed large ships to come through from other dimensions and other domains with aliens.
I heard quite a few came through.
Quite a few. And this began the whole problem of the mass invasion of aliens. They started showing up in large numbers from 47 on. You've heard of the Roswell crashes in 47, 48, 49, the overflights of the White House, the overflights in New Mexico, on and on. Large numbers of ships. Finally, a treaty was signed by President Eisenhower and alien representatives, supposedly at Edwards Air Force Base, granting immunity to each side. We do not interfere with each other's lives or survivability. The technical cooperation, we will supply them with bases underground to do work. We will help them with various things, biological and otherwise. And a general treaty and agreement to work together. Out of that has come some very advanced technology for us. And also some horror stories of horror camps, if you will, for biological experimentation.
Yes,
That is what they wanted to cover and still want to cover. That aspect is what they don't want the public to know about, our cooperation with aliens.
But it has come out in so many different documents.
Yes, it has.
And there's been a lot of discussion about that.
There has been, and there's a lot of denial officially also.
That's right. And one of the things that I wanted to get to that we were discussing about the neurological problems that occurred, how this became the foundation for some of the mind control experiments as a result of that?
Yes, I can briefly. After the war was over and they had this partial and beginning understanding of the human mind and how it can be acted upon by magnetic and electromagnetic fields, there was a lot of other research work done which began in 1947 with Dr. Wilhelm Reich, and of course the CIA was funded and chartered in 1947 also, and he had a contract with the CIA for 5 years. Other work was done in various locations, and it all came down to finding out how to manipulate the human mind, how to reprogram it, how to make a person be, at the push of a button, a perfect robot to do whatever they were programmed to do. This technique is now well resolved. It is a viable technology, if you will, and involved biological knowledge of the brain, how it worked, the interlinking of the conscious mind and the subconscious. And the subconscious is not singular, it's many levels. All of this was learned over a period of decades, and the hardware and some of the old techniques used by, of course, let's say the cults, the satanic cults and so forth, it's old technology without hardware. But they implemented this now with hardware and used some of the same techniques and advanced and made them simpler and easier to use and more effective too. This came out of that, out of the Philadelphia experiment and the work that was done after it. And this is now a technology which is well known to the world governments, and they use very surreptitiously, and they don't want the public to know they're doing it.
But we're getting it all the time. I mean, cellular telephones.
That's right. You're getting effects on the mind from the cellular phones, which can give you disease states if you're exposed long enough. You have bombardment by electric power lines and grids.
Exactly.
Which affect you physiologically if you get enough of it. Mm-hmm. The radio transmissions in a big city from TV and radio, mm-hmm. and other clandestine transmissions that the government doesn't want to tell you about, mm-hmm. from the Air Force and other government installation bases, Air Force bases, Navy bases, whatever. And I'm thinking the Air Force is only one.
No, that's true.
All the bases.
And the microwaves.
And many, many microwaves. Mm-hmm. Microwave ovens can be a problem if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm. But they're not mainly the problem.
No,
it's
they are
the
not.
non-thermal.
All of this has sprung out of that. What frequencies are critical for manipulation of the mind, for making you ill, or programming mm-hmm. the mind without even your knowledge.
That's true.
That is the problem.
So when we start behaving bizarrely, then we might question whether we've been in a field somewhere.
Right. Or somebody sees you behaving in a bizarre manner and you don't realize it. That's, of course, when there's a problem.
Mm-hmm. I think just as an aside, which doesn't really relate to the Philadelphia experiment, but certainly to the effects of that, would be some of these men who are found on school grounds where all of a sudden they show up with a machine gun and they start shooting the children.
Programmed assassins.
Programmed assassins.
And the purpose of that, if I may put it this way, is that person may not know or understand what they're doing at all, but the purpose is to create the horror in the minds of the general public. Here comes this nut shooting down our children, shooting people in a department store mm-hmm. or a supermarket. Mm-hmm. We've got to have gun control.
That's right.
That is the whole purpose, mm-hmm. to get the public infuriated with the improper use of guns. A gun has never shot anybody.
No.
It's the guy pulling or the girl pulling the trigger.
Exactly. Exactly.
Controlling the guns will not stop crime. I'm not trying to put a plug in here, but the fact is,
important.
The fact is, it is those who use the guns that you have to look at.
Exactly. Now, also, there were some good things that came out of that, weren't there? Medical cures and so forth that may or may not be used.
Yes, I understand there was one thing that came out of that, and the Navy found a cure for cancer. Now, there are several. There are many. Of course, the medical profession doesn't really want you to know it. They like to keep people coming for treatment because they make more money that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, the pharmaceutical companies sell a heck of a lot more drugs, don't
they? They have their hand in it.
You bet.
Eventually they may admit to a cure, but if one looks around, one can find cures today which mm-hmm. may or may not involve the medical profession. Mm-hmm. But they found reasons for this, why a person can become subject to cancer and how you can reverse this trend. Because cancer is not a normal condition, even though everybody is born with it, according to some of the old doctors.
Yes. Well, it sounds like it's the frequency that is the
frequencies are critical.
Essence.
Diet is critical. Many things are critical
mm-hmm.
to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get enough reduction in the reflected power, the object will no longer give you a return. Therefore, you have radar invisibility, and that's all they were trying to do. So we proved in the lab you could do this, which is most interesting.
I think it is, because I know I was speaking with someone last week and they said, I thought that was just a science fiction story. I never dreamed that it was real. And I think a lot of our viewers might feel that. So to have you discuss that and then to see these people working at the Tesla Society in research about this gives it a lot more credence and validity.
Yes, there is a lot more yet that can be learned. And they surfaced with some very interesting research and tests, and these are very reputable men. Mm-hmm. They have very good positions.
Well, thank you for bringing that to share with us.
Oh, I'm glad I could.
So, you wanted to talk about what happened to you in this experiment.
Yes. After it was over, I remained in the Navy, and I was reassigned along with my family because I married in late 43 and had a son born in February 1944. They moved me up to Los Alamos, New Mexico, with a bomb project in July of 44. Von Neumann was there and in and out, and he got me transferred. The Navy was happy. He buried me in a place where nobody ever see me, and I wouldn't be concerned if I talked a little about what happened.
Exactly.
But something went wrong in June of 47, and July 4th, 47, I was removed. I was charged with espionage, arrested, handcuffed, taken to Washington, D.C. on a train. And I never saw my family again. The wife I never saw, and the son I never saw. I know the son's still alive. He made several attempts to meet, but the government will not allow him to meet me. They abduct him. They do anything they can.
Is that right?
Yes, it's happened.
Even today?
Even today. Most recently, this last October, it happened again. Only I wasn't there this time. He managed to get through with a group of bodyguards, if you will, to Rochester, New Hampshire.
Why do you think they're doing that?
Because he is living proof for the fact that he did have a past as Edward Cameron, because his name is Jeff Cameron. And he could prove it. Perhaps he has other proofs, materials which have survived, photos, whatever. But they won't want me to see him because he is proof of my past, my real past. Anyway, I was removed, and to make a long story short, I was given a super brainwashing, and I was plugged into another family. Essentially, I started life over, and I grew up as Al Bielek all over again. And there's some pieces I'm leaving out here because we're short on time. But I didn't know anything about my real past until in 1986. After visiting twice the Montauk site, I started to have memories of my being involved with that. And
That really triggered it.
that triggered the Montauk, not the Philadelphia experiment.
Yes.
The later one came first in memory recall. Then in January 1988, for the first time, I saw the movie, The Philadelphia Experiment, one Saturday night, very late, like 4 a.m. on HBO. And that hit me like a bomb that night and started the memories coming back. I had already done a lot of research on the Philadelphia Experiment, had a voracious appetite for any information, whatever, not knowing why. After that, I knew why. I had been involved. So more memory came back after that, and of course I've been on the road of research ever since, plus trying to bring the word to the public of how this has been suppressed and why it had been suppressed. And I felt the survivors and the families deserved something better than having the Navy deny that this experiment ever happened.
So were you one of these that didn't have any record so that you don't get any pay from the government?
True.
I know Duncan
I
had said
disappeared.
the same thing.
So far as the Navy is concerned, the records were buried. You can't find them today.
It's like you don't exist.
And like I don't exist as Edward Cameron, because you can't find school records, you can't find any kind of records or anything to prove that I ever lived as Edward Cameron. Al Bielek, sure, I can pull up all kinds of records. That's fine. That fits what they want, if you will. But I have several perhaps proofs, one ultimate proof. My birth certificate says I was born 31 March 1927, and to Mrs. Albertina Bielek and so forth. Well, in 1985 she broke her leg, went to the hospital, and I went there to visit her, and I look at the stand, and she's in the bed, she's being fed with continuous blood. I look on the bag, it says Mrs. Albertina Bielek, blood type A, and I jolted. I says, blood type A, what's going on here? I'm blood type O. There's no way I could have been her son, and I was the only one.
Amazing.
You don't change blood types as it flows through the embryo.
No, you don't do that.
Right. So
Well, the
I had
mystery
my proof
deepens
right
a little
there
bit there.
that something was wrong. And this was just before the memories started to come back. And then later on, when she was in the nursing home, she had a few flash memories which corroborated to a great extent the story. Like one day she looked at me blankly, 4 months roughly before she died. Like she didn't know me or recognize me. She says, quote, "The baby's dead, isn't it?" Unquote.
Oh, my goodness.
Since I was the only child of record,
interesting.
that proved right there that something had happened.
So they replaced the dead child with you,
If the other one was really dead.
if it was.
Right.
Oh, my.
I was the replacement.
Oh, my. Oh, my. Well, it does happen.
Yes.
It does happen.
And I was replaced as a child. I was 1 year old in appearance at that time and body size. And that's a long story to explain how they did the age regression. They can do physical age regression. It involves ancient technology as well as some current technology. But they do do it.
Do you know
have the
how?
capability.
Do you know how they do that?
It's electronic and chemical, but what it does physically in terms of the body and how long it takes, I don't know. Even though I went through it, I don't remember all of it. Only the beginning phase, where I was still at Cameron, and then blank. And I was a 1-year-old baby sitting at Mother's grand piano, Christmas 1927, watching the family exchange presents and listening to the conversation and understanding most of it. A 1-year child doesn't normally understand the conversation.
That's true. Now, a lot of our viewers are going to ask this question. If they were here in this audience, they would ask, is this the body that you had when you went through this Philadelphia experiment?
Yes, as far as I know, it's the same body.
Okay, because when Duncan Cameron was here and was on, he's not in his same body.
That's correct. He is not.
So you're having the advantage, so to speak, of being able to retrace steps in your own life where the memory of who you were earlier before this experiment happened and
Yes.
before your mind was washed.
Dry cleaned.
Dry cleaned, that you can recall. Can you do that? Can you recall your childhood fairly well at this point?
I can recall major segments of it, not every detail. Even in my life as Al Bielek, I don't recall every detail. But as Edward Cameron, I do recall quite a bit. Duncan recalls none except under hypnosis. Under hypnosis, he can bring it all back,
Interesting.
but not in his normal waking mind.
So, Al, I think that a lot of our viewers would be interested in knowing, how do they brainwash you? What's the process?
The process can be chemical, it can be electronic. In my case, it was a combination of chemical and electronic involving some very massive equipment. A large cylinder, double-walled cylinder, of what appeared to be clear glass, or might have been plastic, I don't know. I was on a hospital gurney-type bed, just a little bit larger than I was. It was shoved in this tube, the end was closed. There were 4 spiral coils connected to electronic equipment lining 2 walls. And John Von Neumann was there at the time and told me what they were going to do to me. He says, I can't stop this or control it. I'm only a consultant here now. And I blanked out. All I had was that funny feeling like when you wake up in the morning, you don't know who you are or where you are, but you know you're awake and alive. And then the rest of it comes back in another few seconds. I was at that point in reverse. And then everything blanked out, and the next thing I could trace in the way of a memory was the one I mentioned, sitting on Mother's grand piano at a Christmas party for the family. It's strange because in 1927 I also can now recall a Christmas party with the family of Edward Cameron in the big house in Long Island, with father and mother and the family there, because I wasn't 1 year old then, I was about 11. I was born in 1916 as Edward Cameron. And I have that overlapping memory of a number of occasions. My father announced in December of 1929 that he was leaving the Navy and getting a retirement. He had a heart problem, so that was why he was leaving. And there were gaps in between, but there are sections I remember.
So did they give you injections of
Yes,
chemicals?
they did give me some kind of an injection of chemical. What it was, I have no idea.
It's pretty interesting that they can fine-tune that, isn't it, to obliterate certain parts of your memory.
In my case of Edward Cameron, they obliterated all the memory because they wanted nothing to remain of my original personality, hopefully for the rest of my life as Al Bielek. But it didn't quite work that way because I became involved in various metaphysical schools and interests, which helped to bring back the memories, sort of fine-tune my memory, which was good anyway.
One of the things that Duncan said when he was here was that they compartmentalized his brain.
In his case, they did, because he was involved with Montauk. They wanted certain abilities to be paramount and other aspects of his personality to be suppressed. And he went through a very heavy brainwashing just to become a person used at Montauk as the current Duncan. And then when it was over and he left and they mustered us out, of course they gave him a very complete reconstitution of his personality because some damage was done during the process of being used. And they wanted to give him a reconstituted personality would be able to get along in normal society because they did not anticipate using him again, but they wanted to keep him handy in case it did. And they wanted him to be in shape to be able to be used.
Yeah, they'd want to monkey around with him to that degree that he wouldn't be functional.
Correct. In my case, they mustered me out and gave me a briefer brainwashing. Perhaps that's why it came back so readily only 2 or so years later. And Duncan's case, it didn't come back so readily, but it did come back that he had been involved.
It's coming back.
It's coming back more and more now. Certain aspects that he's remembered of his involvement in Montauk and give him the willies, as the saying goes, and he becomes very ill. He even broke down and cried one time in the underground. When he
Yes, I saw that on the video.
So he cannot, to this day, face some aspects of what he was involved in and what he had to do. Was programmed to do. It was not his normal personality.
No.
This is the way they can shape people to do a job which normally they would never come near or never touch. They'd shoot themselves first. But after you work a person's mind over sufficiently, when you can find the keys to get in there and do the manipulation, and then get this person to do virtually anything they want.
That's pretty scary.
It is, but it's a fact. And they've been doing this now for many years to tens of thousands of people.
That's even scarier. What are they doing in this current time?
They're still continuing the Montauk Boys program. It's still ongoing. They're not doing it at Montauk anymore, but they're doing the same type of programming all around the country. Back in the 80s, there were many locations. Now, I know there's a location in Atlanta, there's one in the Seattle area, there's one, of course, someplace in Long Island to this day, upstate New York. You name any major city, I think you will find, and I found a few, and Preston have found a few, I think you'll find any major city today there's a processing facility, I'll put it that way, for taking these kids off the street or however they acquire them, running them through this mill, giving them the brainwashing, the implant, the reshaping of their personality, and then covering it all over so that they have a normal, outside, normal, everyday personality, but there is exposed someplace certain trigger commands.
Certain words that might trigger.
On a telephone or in person, however it may be done, to flip their personality to the programmed personality, then to do whatever they're supposed to do. It can be a programmed assassin, it can be a programmed rioter, an agitator, somebody goes in the schoolyard and shoots some people, whatever.
So we don't know who we are.
You don't know who they are, and they don't know who they are. These people, I've talked with some of them, realize something's wrong, something is a little different about them perhaps, and know that they do some things once in a while, but they have no recall of what they really do in most cases, or that they are not a normal mind. It's now so well done that these people have no awareness that they have been tampered with. This is the bad part.
Yes, it is. So it's cause for reflection, for sure.
Yes, very definitely.
Well, we have about a minute left, so is there something that you would like to say in summation?
Well, there's more and more information coming out as to the Philadelphia experiment. The Montauk Project is being exposed, now 3 books and some videos, and it's getting some TV coverage. I expect to be on a major TV show sometime this year. I've already done my part. It's in the can, as the saying goes.
Okay, great.
But it will not be released until sometime after June. And this sort of exposure to the public and waking them up to what our government has done in secret and hidden from them with tax money or other money, however they acquired it. The public has a right to know, not everything. I mean, you don't want to tell the public how to build an atomic bomb, as an example. But what has been done to these people? What has been done to their kids? What dangers they are exposed to? They have a right to know.
In the dimly lit room, the air crackles with an electric tension, as if the very fabric of reality is being pulled taut. It's a space where theories collide, where whispers of the past intertwine with the echoes of the future, and where the boundaries of science blur into the realm of the extraordinary. Let's talk about Project Rainbow, a name that resonates with both intrigue and skepticism. It's a name that conjures images of clandestine military operations, of ships disappearing and reappearing, and of scientists grappling with the very nature of time itself. The Philadelphia experiment, as it is commonly known, is steeped in mystery, a puzzle that has captivated the minds of many, from conspiracy theorists to physicists. At its core, the Philadelphia experiment is said to have involved the USS Eldridge, a naval destroyer escort that, according to some accounts, was subjected to a series of experiments aimed at rendering it invisible to radar. But the story doesn't end there. Allegations swirl around the ship, claiming it was not only made invisible, but also teleported through time and space. Imagine that. A vessel a piece of metal and machinery slipping through the very fabric of time, a concept that has tantalized scientists and dreamers alike for generations. But can it be done? Can we really traverse the river of time, or is it merely a fanciful notion, a figment of our collective imagination? To understand the physics behind time travel, we must first delve into the theories proposed by one of the greatest minds in human history, Albert Einstein. His work on the theory of relativity revolutionized our understanding of space and time, suggesting that they are not separate entities, but rather intertwined in a four-dimensional continuum. Time, as Einstein posited, is not a constant. It bends and warps in the presence of mass. This leads us to ponder whether the manipulation of gravitational fields could, in theory, allow for time travel. If we could harness the energy of a massive object, could we create a distortion in the space-time continuum, enabling us to leap across the ages? The implications of such ideas are staggering. If time travel were possible, what would it mean for our understanding of history? Would we be able to witness the signing of the Declaration of Independence, or perhaps stand on the surface of Mars as ancient civilizations thrived? Mars, the red planet, has long been a source of fascination, not just for its geological features, but for the tantalizing possibility that it once harbored life. Could it be that the very physics of time travel is intertwined with our quest to understand extraterrestrial life? After all, if we can manipulate time, could we not also traverse the cosmos, visiting other planets and civilizations that may have existed long before our own? The connection between the Philadelphia experiment and UFOs is another thread in this intricate tapestry. Reports of strange lights in the sky, of unidentified flying objects performing maneuvers that defy the laws of physics, have fueled speculation that these phenomena are linked to advanced technologies, perhaps even time travel. Could it be that the experiments conducted in Philadelphia were not merely about military advantage, but rather an exploration of the unknown, a gateway to understanding the universe and our place within it? As we sift through the layers of conspiracy and speculation, it becomes clear that the narrative surrounding the Philadelphia experiment is as much about humanity's desire to explore the unknown as it is about the scientific principles that govern our reality. The stories of sailors who reportedly experienced disorientation, of men who found themselves trapped in walls, are chilling reminders of the potential consequences of tampering with forces beyond our understanding. What if, in our quest to unlock the secrets of the universe, we inadvertently opened a door that should have remained closed? Yet, amidst the chaos of speculation, there lies a kernel of truth. The scientific community has made strides in understanding the nature of time and space, yet we remain on the precipice of discovery. Quantum mechanics, with its bizarre and counterintuitive principles, suggests that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously, that they can be entangled across vast distances. Could it be that these principles hold the key to time travel? That our understanding of the universe is merely a stepping stone to a greater comprehension of reality? The role of Einstein in the Philadelphia experiment is a subject of much debate. While there is no concrete evidence linking him directly to the project, his theories laid the groundwork for the exploration of concepts that would later be associated with time travel. Some claim that the military sought his expertise, hoping to harness his genius to unlock the secrets of invisibility and teleportation. Others argue that Einstein's work was misappropriated, twisted into a narrative that served the interests of those in power. Regardless of the truth, the mere suggestion of his involvement adds a layer of mystique to the already enigmatic tale. As we navigate this labyrinth of ideas, we must confront the question that looms large. What if time travel is not merely a theoretical construct, but a reality waiting to be discovered? What if the Philadelphia experiment was a glimpse into a future where the boundaries of time and space are fluid, where we can traverse the ages and witness the unfolding of history? The implications are profound, touching upon the very essence of what it means to be human. Imagine standing in the midst of a bustling market in ancient Rome, or gazing upon the pyramids as they rise majestically against the desert sun. The ability to witness such moments would not only reshape our understanding of history, but also challenge the very foundations of our existence. If we could travel through time, would we be mere observers, or would our presence alter the course of events? The paradoxes of time travel are as intricate as the theories that underpin them, raising questions that may never find resolution. But let's not forget the tantalizing possibility that our endeavors to understand time travel may lead us to the stars. As we gaze into the night sky, we are reminded of the vastness of the universe, of the countless worlds that lie beyond our reach. The search for extraterrestrial life has captivated our imaginations for centuries, and perhaps the key to unlocking the mysteries of the cosmos lies in our understanding of time itself. If we can manipulate time, could we not also traverse the galaxies, reaching distant planets that may harbor life? The connection between time travel and UFOs is not merely a coincidence. It is a reflection of our desire to explore the unknown. The stories of alien encounters, of beings from other worlds visiting our planet, often blur the lines between science fiction and reality. Are these visitors from the future traveling back in time to observe us, or perhaps to warn us of the consequences of our actions? The possibilities are as endless as the universe itself, and as we delve deeper into the mysteries of time and space, we find ourselves at the intersection of science and the sublime. As we contemplate the implications of the Philadelphia experiment, we must also grapple with the ethical considerations that arise from our pursuit of knowledge. In our quest to unlock the secrets of the universe, we must ask ourselves, at what cost? The stories of the sailors who experienced the horrors of the experiment serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge must be tempered with responsibility. If we are to venture into the unknown, we must do so with reverence for the forces we seek to understand. In the end, the narrative of Project Rainbow is not just about the Philadelphia experiment. It is about humanity's insatiable curiosity, our desire to push the boundaries of what is known, and our quest to understand our place in the cosmos. It is a story that transcends time, weaving together the threads of science, speculation, and the human experience. As we stand on the precipice of discovery, we must remember that the journey is as important as the destination, and that the pursuit of knowledge is a reflection of our deepest aspirations and fears. So, as we explore the physics of time travel, as we ponder the role of Einstein, and as we gaze into the mysteries of the universe, let us embrace the unknown with open hearts and minds, ready to confront the challenges and wonders that lie ahead. For in the end, it is not just about the experiments conducted in the shadows. It is about the light of understanding that illuminates our path, guiding us through the labyrinth of existence and into the uncharted territories of time and space.
People of this country and the world know the truth of the matter, which is that the U.S. government secretly achieved numerous forms of time travel. By 1970, and I was one of the children that was brought into those activities for a number of reasons. And I presented that story when I last had the pleasure here of appearing at the Free Your Mind conference in April of 2011. The other major component of my truth campaign has been to establish not only the fact that Mars is an inhabited planet, but that our government, the United States government, has been sending U.S. chrononauts to the planet Mars since the late 1970s and has established a secret colony there. And that's established not only on the basis of my testimony, but now 6 others who have come forward and a few new names that I'm going to share with you today. Here's, in this image, we have one of the Martian life forms that I call plesiosaurs, because they're very similar to the plesiosaurs that were rife on this planet before the KT extinction event. Now, today I'm going to focus on my experiences, not as a child in Project Pegasus, but When I was at UCLA as an undergraduate in the early 1980s, and I was basically recalled into government service as one of the college-aged chrononauts attached to the CIA's jump room program. Just to give some backstory here, our brilliant friend Jay Widener theorizes, that is, he states that he's concluded that the Illuminati conspiracy begun by Adam Weishaupt in the 1770s was a multi-generational conspiracy to found the United States of America so that we could restore the status quo ante prior to the solar system catastrophe around 9500 BC and place a human presence from Earth back on Mars again. And isn't it curious that we have the Great Pyramid on our national currency, on our $1 bill? I would also note that we're living in a time that one of my fellow jumpers in the Mars jump room program of the early 1980s, a same-aged peer by the name of Barack Obama, who's currently clearly President of the United States, then using the name Barry Soetoro, was not only trained with us, but we were deployed operationally, sometimes in the same jump room, sometimes meeting up on the surface of Mars, and that this individual has now twice been elected President of the United States, and the only public controversy that's been raised about his background is whether or not he's a natural-born citizen under Article 2 of the Constitution. In fact, he was a direct participant in the Mars jump room program of the CIA, and hence is a veteran of the secret space program. So, when I last appeared here, we were talking about the historical lag of 40 years and the fact that we crossed the threshold of time travel by 1970. Here we have a situation where this young Democrat president has been elected twice now by the American people, and we don't know really anything about him as a result of the sealing of his records. And despite the hundreds of radio interviews I've done and the numerous public appearances, there has been no mainstream journalistic attention focused on President Obama's service in the jump room program. So I'm going to be sharing some of that with you today. Now, my personal experience in the Mars jump room program of the early 80s had its roots in my service on Project Pegasus as a child under the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Most of my activities were focused on teleportation, which involves opening up a vortal tunnel in time-space and sending somebody through it to a distant location that we would refer to as the past or future. And another technology called chronovision. A chronovisor is an electro-optical device that creates a field of supercharged particles that are so dense that you can identify the residual signal of a past event or the potential signal of a future event, magnify it, that is, amplify it, and bring it into the laboratory. Either to use that hologram as a form of remote viewing, or if you're immersed in the hologram when it's formulated on the stage of the device, you experience going to that time and place. So chronovision ultimately becomes a form of time travel. And I was involved in Project Pegasus initially in 1967-68 when I first teleported between New Jersey and New Mexico as a 6-year-old. And I was officially brought in the fall of 1969, and I was involved in different forms of time travel until the end of the summer of 1972, when I was nearing age 11. And during those 4 years, I had 4 hidden summers in New Mexico as a result of teleporting there, spending time there, involved in secret project activities, and then teleporting back to New Jersey, arriving on the afternoon of the day I had originally left. So the timeline here is somewhat convoluted because they were using time loops to create places where we would do secret work for the Defense Department, and then collapse those time loops by having us teleport back to the day we left on the East Coast. During those years of being immersed in Project Pegasus, there were 5 foreshadowings of the fact that I would find myself going to Mars as a college student 10 years later. The first was around 1968, at the time I first began teleporting to New Mexico. My father came home to our home and our house in Morris Plains, New Jersey from the offices of the Ralph M. Parsons Company, which were then still in New York City. They were on Wall Street in New York. He was clearly inebriated, and he gathered my siblings and my mother and I into the living room of our house in Mars Plains, because he said that he wanted to read something to us that somebody had written about the first discovery of life on Mars and how hilarious it was. And what he then spent about 15 minutes narrating were passages from my 2008 paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, that were the most fanciful or farcical. Because I ran to my father and I grabbed the file that he was reading from out of his hands, and it said, Andrew Basiago, The Discovery of Life on Mars, 2008. So by then they not only had my 2008 paper, but it had been in the possession of the CIA, which my father was basically aligned with as a defense community engineer for Parsons, and had actually bowdlerized the content of that paper to deceive my dad about what I had written about. About a year later, 1969, he's giving me a haircut up in the bedroom part of the house there, and he puts the razor down and goes to a manila envelope, unties the envelope, and says, take a look at this, son. And I said, what is it? And he said, it's a Martian. I said, what do you mean a Martian? He says, it's a human being like us, except it's on Mars. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, guess who discovers it? And I said, who? And he goes, you do. NASA sent some robots, some rovers up to Mars, among other activities directed at the Red Planet, and sends photographs back, and you analyze those photographs, and in 2008 you write a paper containing the first images of humanoid beings on another planet. Here's one of them that you publish in your paper. So at this point, by 1969, when I'm being officially brought into Project Pegasus, they have the paper, and the CIA has comprehended the significance of these images from NASA photograph PIA 10214, which is a western view taken from the home plate plateau of the West Valley of the Columbia Basin of the Gusev crater of Mars. And that photograph is chock full of evidence of ancient artifacts and biological beings on Mars. About a year later, summer of 1970, I'm just hanging out on a Saturday morning at our house in Mars Plains, and my dad says, come on, son, we've got to go over to Curtis Wright, the place where the teleport was located. And we're in the car, and I said, why do we have to go to Curtis Wright, Dad? Are we going to be jumping to New Mexico again? And he said, no, there's some Martians over there, and they want to meet you. Because apparently what had happened is that on a technical liaison activity with Martian aerospace engineers who had come here to transfer technology to our aerospace community, a discussion about my paper about life on Mars that wouldn't be published until, 38 years later, had been discussed with the Martian representatives, and they wanted to meet the child who would grow up and write this paper. So I went over to Curtis Wright with my father, and we met 3 homely, bald, Caucasian men. I'm using Jackie Coogan and Mike Myers here to represent them. Very close. They basically were Caucasian-looking men from a narrow gene pool. Well, how big is the gene pool on Mars? It consists of 4 different typologies, but only numbers about 1 million individuals living primarily on the Martian surface. So these are very narrowly genetically focused individuals, and they tend to be a little bit on the homely side. 1971, I'm recovering from bronchitis. We're going out when I was sick on Halloween of 71. And my dad comes into our guest bedroom where we were always convalescing with our childhood illnesses and says, take a look at this, son. And he hands me my 2008 paper. Why? Because since the advent of time travel in 1967-68, the CIA and other alphabet agencies of the United States government have been sourcing written material and information on microfilm and other forms from the future. In this case, they had a copy of my 2008 paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars. So my dad handed me the paper, and I knew it was an artifact from the future because it had a copyright date of 2008. My dad said, take a look at the date. How old are you going to be then? I said, well, in 2008, I'm going to be 47. He said, yeah, when you're 47, you write this paper. And we noted the fact that it contained my middle initial D, which, as a Roman Catholic, I wouldn't take Daniel as a confirmation name. until our move to Southern California in 1972-73 timeframe, or even after that, age 13 in California. So that was anomalous too. I saw my name, but it had a middle initial that I didn't recognize. And it was also printed in Microsoft Word for Windows Arial 12-point type font that didn't exist at that time. So my dad said, Andrew, the purpose of this exercise, I'm going to go away for a couple hours. I want you to read your paper from the future, all of the text, study all the photographs of life forms and ancient artifacts on Mars that you place in this paper in the future, and then read the captions and try to relate the material in the captions to the photographs. And I said, well, why, Dad? If I'm going to write this anyway, based on analyzing NASA's images from Mars, why do you want me to read it before I write it? It can't be any better than when I'm going to write it, right? In terms of what goes into it, which is kind of a quantum paradox. And he said, well, we think that's probably the case, but just to be on the safe side, when you do write the paper 37 years from now, 38 years from now, we want it to contain as much information about life on Mars as possible. So this gets into the whole issue of how prior knowledge of future events may influence those events. They were doing sort of what I call a quantum enrichment activity, where they were making sure that I read one version of my paper on a timeline so that it would be the best possible expose of life forms on Mars, whatever timeline I ended being up on by the time I wrote the paper. But it was the paper. I wasn't given their paper. Some people have said, well, you were brainwashed or you were memorized their paper. No, I spent a goodly part of 2008 researching and writing that paper, and actually went into seclusion in December of 2008 for 3 weeks during a snowstorm in Portland, Oregon, where I was then living, to write this paper from scratch. So it was a quantum artifact from the future that my father handed me. 1972, my project activities on Project Pegasus are winding to a conclusion. My dad comes back to the La Hacienda restaurant in Old Town Albuquerque, New Mexico, where his longtime friend and sometimes companion, Mary Constance Chavez, worked as the cashier and sometimes waitress there. And my dad was he looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. He was thunderstruck from something. And so my dad said, stay here, Andy, I want to talk to Connie about something. He took Connie across the restaurant, and I meandered over there ultimately to listen to what they were talking about. And the only thing I heard is, by Connie Chavez, she said, well, does he go up there before or after he publishes the paper with all those critters up there? So apparently what had happened is my father, who had placed me in Connie's care there, sort of babysitting me at the restaurant where she worked, he had been in some kind of technical meeting with other Parsons engineers and the CIA people on the project and so forth, DARPA people, and apparently he had been told that some of the kids on Project Pegasus, including myself, were ultimately going to be teleporting to Mars. Because that is, in fact, what they were talking about Mars over in the corner of the restaurant. Okay, so I leave Project Pegasus as just about the time I'm going on age 11 in fall of 72. I have an ordinary junior high and high school period in Southern California. I do my first year of college at UC San Diego, put an intercampus transfer for UCLA coming in the fall of 80. But in the summer of 80, my father announces to me in the household there in Chatsworth, California, he says, son, you're going to be going on a camping trip again this summer, but it's just going to be a father and son camping trip. And I said, oh really, where are we going, Dad? He said, we're going to be going back to Lake Siskiyou near Mount Shasta. Here's a very beautiful picture of Lake Siskiyou near Mount Shasta. And so, next Saturday we'll be getting up really early and loading the boat and going up there. And so I just thought it was an ordinary camping trip. I was expected to do some fishing with my dad, maybe some water skiing, just hang out. There's a campsite there on the northern shores of Lake Siskiyou. It's actually kind of where this camera was when this picture was taken. And so we head up the I-5 corridor in California, which encompasses most of the state. Shasta's pretty far north. And the first strange thing that happened is when we got to exit 745 off the I-5 corridor and went about 9 miles to McLeod, California, my dad parked our station wagon and the boat, towing the boat, in this parking lot in front of the McLeod Market, which is a major sort of grocery store there in McLeod, California. And he said, son, I'm going to be going into the store for about 15 minutes. What I want you to do is just stay in the car. I mean, do everything within your power to stay seated in the car. I'll be out fairly soon. And just leave the car if the car basically catches on fire. But try to stay inside the vehicle. And he goes into McLeod Market for about 15 or 20 minutes, comes out, and I'm astonished, because as my dad gets back in the driver's seat, he's got about a 5-day growth of beard. And so he must have gone in and accessed the facilities that are underground, underneath Mount Shasta and the Shasta Dam, which have been there for decades. There's deep underground military bases beneath Shasta. Who knows, maybe that's why they scripted all this, the Shaver mystery and these other Mount Shasta kind of mysteries to cover some of that Defense Department activity in Siskiyou County. And I said, Dad, what the hell happened? What do you mean, son? Well, I said, you went into the market there 15 minutes ago, clean shaven, and now you have like a 5-day growth of beard. And my dad was very clever. He was sort of an engineer, educated at Lehigh, who had been consulting the CIA for decades, the Air Force, the Navy. He was from rural Pennsylvania, here in this state. He was born in Summit Hill, Pennsylvania, on a kitchen table in May of 1923. So he was a clever survivor of a pretty deprived childhood here in this state during the Depression. And he said, what do you mean, son? You know, whenever we go camping, I let my beard grow. And I said, yeah, it doesn't grow 5 days growth of beard in 15 minutes yet, so I know you've been up to something. Unbeknownst to me, that same weekend, a 13-year-old growing up in, a junior high school student growing up in La Cunada, California, William Brett Stillings, that weekend was having an identical experience. His dad tells him they're going to go on a father and son camping trip. He pulls the car up to the McLeod Market, and actually Brett says that his father, Tom Stillings, actually shaved before going into the market. That must have been the phone call that my dad placed to somebody when we were there that weekend. Now, when I started my campaign to tell my experiences in the U.S. Time Space Program, everybody was telling me, there's things you're not going to remember. And arrogantly, I was saying, well, I've spent about 10 years on this, from 1999, 2000 to the present. You know, it's 2010, I've been lecturing about it, appearing on Coast to Coast AM and other mainstream media venues about it and so forth. And I said, I think I've got everything about what happened to me. So, William B. Stillings calls me on April 23rd of 2010, after hearing me on Coast to Coast AM on November 11th of 2009, and says, we basically have to talk. And I said, why? And he says, because I know who you are. And I said, what do you mean? He said, we work together. And so I thought maybe this was one of the kids who had been in Project Pegasus in the early 70s. And I said, well, where did we work together and when? And he goes, you don't remember the campground at Mount Shasta? And what then followed were hundreds of hours of Skype calls between Brett and I, where we began to reformulate in our minds an understanding what had happened that summer. The first strange thing that happened is that Brett and his father showed up after my dad and I had already set up our tent in the campground there at Lake Siskiyou. And then his dad came over to our campground and said to my father, he introduced himself to me and said to my dad, I'm not sure you know who I am, but we work for the same company. Well, that wasn't Parsons or Tom's employer, that was the CIA. That's some of that spook speak, you know, of the CIA being the company. The other strange thing that happened is Brett went back to at his father's insistence, went back to their van, which I've actually identified as a pumpkin orange Vanagon from that era of the late 70s, and got a shoebox out. And Tom Stillings took a piece of metal about this big and about that thin, about the length of a chalk eraser, and took it down above the ground and said, now watch this, Andy. And he said to my dad, I don't have to show this to you, Ray, because you work with this. And basically, as a result of reverse gravitic forces, or magnetic forces actually, this piece of metal hovered over the ground. So here we have this strange science lesson. I thought we were going to be camping. Then the next day, promptly at 1 o'clock, without saying anything to Brett and I, my father Raymond and his father Thomas, representing respectively the Ralph M. Parsons Company, one of the world's largest process engineering companies and a major defense contractor, and somebody working as an operations analyst for Lockheed Skunk Works in Burbank, California, get up without saying anything to each other and start walking across the campground. Brett and I could kind of see which campsite they were going to. So we ran ahead of our fathers into this campsite. And between a camper and a car, we met this individual, Edwin Aldrin, the second human being to walk on the moon in this epoch of human civilization on Earth, this second civilization of human life on Earth. And he knows who we are. So at this point, again, kind of a little bit of an air of unreality is kind of dwelling here, certainly in my mind, I think in Brett's as well. Brett's highly intuitive, and I believe he was ultimately involved in the jump rope program because he's a technical genius. So he's very right-brained. He kind of looks over me like, why is Buzz Aldrin at this campground? And before we could say anything to astronaut Aldrin, he was just dressed in ordinary camping clothes, not his spacesuit. He said, Andy, Brett, it's a pleasure to meet you, boys, or fellas. Well, let me tell you, you two are going to be doing something I did a few years back, and that's go off planet. Well, let me tell you, fellas, it's going to be the opportunity of a lifetime. So it's like, wait a minute, I thought we were going to be going fishing here, Dad. You brought me into a meeting with the second man to land on the moon. This is getting a little bit disconcerting. So that night around the campfire, about 10 o'clock, you've got the beautiful Milky Way galaxy above you. Shasta can often be seen in the moonlight hovering over as this white mystical object, sacred mountain. And the sparks are going up and toward the heavens, and my dad looks at me and then over at Brett and back at me and says, boys, you're going to be taking some classes tomorrow. And I said, in what, Dad? I thought we were going to have a camping trip this summer. He goes, no, we brought you here because you're going to be involved in an educational curriculum here in Siskiyou. And I said, where? And he said, up the freeway a couple stops at College of the Siskiyous. And I said, about what? And he said, everything to do with Mars. And I said, Dad, I just completed my astronomy breath requirement at UC San Diego. I don't want to become an astronaut. I'm going to be a history major in the fall at UCLA, maybe write for the school paper. I don't want to go into space. Why do we have to know anything about Mars? Why does Brett? And my dad looked at me and said, because some of you kids in the program are going to be going there. So now, not just Edwin Buzz Aldrin, but my beloved dad is telling me that we're going to Mars. The next morning, that first Monday of the 3 weeks we spent there, our fathers drive us up to the College of the Siskiyous Extension in Wairika, California, not in Weed, where their main campus is. And at this prison-like extension building, we met our instructor, Major Ed Baines of remote viewing fame, who was then serving, as you can find, if he still has it on his own website, in his biography on his own website, he was then serving as a scientific and technical intelligence officer for the U.S. Army, the very person you would use as a briefing officer for U.S. personnel going to Mars or any other planet. We spent several days at the extension building, and during that first day meeting Ed and 8 other teenagers and college students, Brett and I were removed. I know that mind control has been one of the themes of this gathering here. Brett and I were individually removed from the room after being told we were going to be taken into the next room and tortured. We were taken into a small college room, kind of like those half rooms you have in chemistry labs, with counters, black scientific counters. And there, an Army officer and a scientist in a white lab coat talking to us in very quiet terms told each of us, and Brett and I have corroborated this, that if we talked about going to Mars over the next several years, we would be physically tortured. Of course, I had been physically tortured when I left Project Pegasus as almost an 11-year-old, and I had overcome that torture to tell the true account of having time travel. But in this case, right before we even really are getting acclimated to the classroom setting, we're moved from the room under the belief we were going to be taken to the next room and tortured, and then really told in no uncertain terms that we would be tortured if we talked about the program.
As the credits start to roll, the screen fades to black, and a hush falls over the audience. A sense of contemplation fills the air. The journey we've just taken through the murky waters of the Philadelphia experiment and Project Rainbow is not merely a tale of science gone astray. It's a reflection of our deepest fears and wildest ambitions. It's a narrative woven with threads of conspiracy, human ingenuity, and the unfathomable complexities of time itself. We've heard the haunting testimonies of Ali Bielek and Andrew Basiago, both claiming to have been part of government experiments that defy the very laws of physics as we understand them. They've painted vivid pictures of time travel, of being thrust into alternate realities, and of encounters that seem to blur the lines between past, present, and future. But what have we truly learned from their accounts? And what do they reveal about the nature of our existence? First, let's dissect the testimonies of Bielek and Basiago. Their stories are filled with fantastical elements, time machines, interdimensional travel, and encounters with beings that could very well be future humans rather than extraterrestrial visitors. Bielek's narrative, with its claims of being transported through time to witness pivotal moments in history, challenges our perception of linear time. Meanwhile, Basiago's assertions about the Montauk Project and its alleged experiments in psychic abilities raise questions about the extent of human potential and the ethical boundaries we've crossed in the name of progress. Are these men simply deluded, or are they messengers from a reality we've yet to grasp? The skepticism surrounding their claims is palpable, yet it cannot overshadow the profound implications of their narratives. As we sift through the layers of their testimonies, we must confront the reality of government secrecy. The CIA's MK-Ultra program, with its dark legacy of mind control and psychological experimentation, serves as a chilling reminder of how far authorities might go in the pursuit of power and knowledge. It's not a leap to consider that Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment could be offshoots of these clandestine endeavors. If the mind can be manipulated, what's to stop the manipulation of time itself? The ethical concerns are staggering, and they echo through the corridors of history, reminding us that the quest for knowledge often comes at a steep price. And then there's the tantalizing notion of UFOs, a topic that has captivated humanity for generations. The recent wave of UFO disclosures has reignited interest in the possibility of extraterrestrial life visiting our planet. Yet, what if these visitors are not from distant galaxies, but rather from our own future? Steven Spielberg's theory, that we may be encountering future humans, shifts the narrative from one of alien invasion to one of human evolution. It suggests that our descendants, equipped with advanced technology and knowledge, are reaching back through time to understand their origins, or perhaps to correct the mistakes of the past. This perspective invites us to reconsider our relationship with time and the cyclical nature of history. If we accept the premise that future humans might be visiting us, we must also grapple with the implications of such encounters. What does it mean for our understanding of free will, destiny, and the choices we make today? If our actions are being observed by those who have already lived through the consequences of our decisions, do we bear a greater responsibility for our choices? The weight of this realization can be overwhelming, yet it also opens the door to a deeper understanding of our place in the universe. We are not merely passive participants in a predetermined narrative. We are active creators of our reality, shaping the future with every thought and action. Moreover, the intersection of these narratives, the Philadelphia experiment, Project Rainbow, and the potential for future human visitation, challenges us to rethink the nature of reality itself. What if time is not a straight line but a complex tapestry, where past, present, and future intertwine? This notion resonates with various philosophical and scientific theories, including the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which posits that every decision spawns alternate realities. In this light, Bielek and Basiago's experiences could be seen as glimpses into parallel timelines, where the outcomes of our choices manifest in different forms. As we reflect on the implications of these testimonies, we must also consider the role of storytelling in shaping our understanding of the world. The narratives of Bielek and Basiago, whether entirely factual or embellished, serve a purpose. They provoke thought, inspire curiosity, and challenge the status quo. They remind us that the boundaries of human experience are not as rigid as we might believe. In a world increasingly dominated by scientific rationalism, their stories beckon us to explore the unknown, to embrace the mysteries that lie beyond our comprehension. In this age of information, where skepticism reigns supreme, we must also recognize the value of personal experience. The testimonies of individuals like Bielek and Basiago resonate on a visceral level, tapping into our collective yearning for connection and understanding. They invite us to question the narratives that have been handed down to us, to seek our own truths amidst the noise of modern life. Perhaps their most significant contribution lies not in the veracity of their claims, but in their ability to ignite our imaginations and spur us on a quest for knowledge. As we stand at the crossroads of possibility, we are faced with a choice to embrace the unknown or to retreat into the comfort of certainty. The stories of Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment remind us that the pursuit of knowledge is fraught with peril, but also ripe with potential. They challenge us to confront our fears and to expand our horizons. In a world where the lines between reality and fiction blur, we must remain vigilant, questioning the narratives we encounter and seeking the truths that resonate with our own experiences. In closing, the journey we've embarked on through the lens of these extraordinary claims has illuminated the complexities of our existence. We find ourselves at a juncture where science fiction bleeds into reality, where the boundaries of time and space are not as absolute as we once believed. The testimonies of Ali Bielek and Andrew Basiago serve as a reminder that the quest for understanding is an ongoing endeavor, one that invites us to explore the depths of our consciousness and the vastness of the universe. As we step away from the screen, let us carry these lessons with us. Let us remain open to the possibilities that lie beyond our current understanding. The age of UFO disclosure may very well be the dawn of a new era, an era where we acknowledge our interconnectedness with the past, present, and future. It is a call to action, a reminder that every moment is a choice, and every choice shapes the tapestry of our existence. The stories we tell, the truths we seek, and the connections we forge will ultimately define our journey through time. And perhaps, just perhaps, we are not alone in this endeavor, but rather part of a larger narrative that transcends the confines of our understanding.